Maxx Crosby to Philadelphia. The rumors are heating up, and the Eagles are reportedly one of the teams keeping a very close eye on the Raiders star. Now, do the Eagles have enough to surrender for the Raiders star, and could a deal possibly be in the works? We're going to discuss that and more on a new episode of Flipping the Birds. Let's get it.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside David Neese. Corey Naito is taking the night off, and I hope he's doing well. But nonetheless, we are here to discuss one topic, which is going to lead to another topic, because it feels like Eagles offseason is not taking any downtime whatsoever. Like, we can't have a vacation, we can't rest, because there's always something new in the news, whether it's being reported by folks that we don't really agree with, or whether it's being reported by legit folks. But nonetheless, it's Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. If you're in my household, how you feeling, David?
Good. Yeah, I love Taco Tuesday, as you well know. I try to send you a picture every Tuesday of wherever I'm eating that particular day.
I feel like my wife has very unintentionally made every Tuesday Taco Tuesday, and I look forward to it because it's Flipping the Birds Tuesdays. You can't go wrong with tacos.
No.
And it's just a good Tuesdays are great. But let's talk about something else that's great. On the rumor mill, like, it's been in the rumors for quite some time. I know Bart Scott of ESPN mentioned that, he thinks the Eagles could trade for Maxx Crosby. He thinks that they'll land them. And recently an article came out saying that the Eagles are scorching hot on the tail of Maxx Crosby. So first, let's discuss how realistic this could possibly be, that the Eagles could land Maxx Crosby after the Baltimore Ravens' very weird failed attempt of keeping him in Baltimore in favor of them signing a Trey Hendrickson. Do you feel like this is a possibility that the Eagles could land him?
I mean, there's a lot of smoke, but there's no confirmed fire, so to speak, at this point. To your first question, do they have enough to get him? Yeah, they have a first-round pick in 2027 and 2 in 2028. So the Raiders already showed their hand what they'd be willing to accept for him, because the Ravens made that deal and then rescinded. But 2-1s would obviously get it done. Most people speculate now it probably wouldn't even take 2-1s because of what popped up, during the report that they did there as far as the physical. But you're right, multiple reports and rumors have linked the Eagles as a potential landing spot if he becomes available. And a lot of people have specifically pointed to Howie as the type of GM who would aggressively pursue such a pass rusher. I guess you have to ask yourself, would they still do that even after acquiring Jonathan Grenard, which would lead me to believe if they were going after him, it would be someone like maybe Nolan Smith going back to the Las Vegas Raiders, because there would be a glutton of pass rushers with Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, Jonathan Grenard, and, if you threw Maxx Crosby into the mix. I tried to reach out to a couple people I know who cover the Raiders, and they put it at about 60% chance that he stays with the Raiders, 40% chance that they would trade him. Which is kind of high. I mean, 40%, we're almost talking 50-50 chance there. And they would say of that 40%, they would put 20% he goes somewhere else, 20% he goes to the Eagles. So there's definitely been interest, I think. Howie checks in on everybody, but he's really been desirous of getting a pass rusher. I think we've seen that with, his involvement in Myles Garrett as well. He wants a top-tier elite pass rusher while they have this window to pair with Jalen Carter.
And you mentioned Jalen Carter, right? Because obviously, apparently, he came up in the talks for Myles Garrett, and the Eagles, rightfully so, did not trade him for Myles Garrett. But there's another player that I feel like could possibly fit the mold of what the Raiders are looking for in exchange for Maxx Crosby outside of a first-round pick. But Nolan Smith, I feel like, is the one constant rumor that we've heard all offseason. Hasn't been Jalix Hunt. Everybody knows and is looking forward to the ceiling of Jalix Hunt. But Nolan Smith has had an interesting start to his Eagles career. Rookie season, he did a hell of a job, but he's been banged up ever since. He's been a little inconsistent ever since. Do you feel like the Raiders look at a player like Nolan Smith and a possible first-round pick as like, okay, like this makes a lot of sense for what we're losing in Maxx Crosby?
Well, I do think they would have interest in Nolan Smith and obviously, an additional first, but it would probably take a little bit more. Well, how much more, I don't know, but I don't think that they would take Nolan Smith and just a single one. I think that's been what the Eagles have been offering. I mean, I think that was their play with Myles Garrett as well. Nolan's name has come up in a lot of those trade talks, and not a lot of that leaks from the Eagle side. So it's coming from who they've had discussions with, those opposing teams that they've, discussed with. And the Raiders, have publicly maintained they want to keep Crosby, which of course that would be their stance. But they've also invested a lot of money on the defensive side of the ball this year. I believe they spent 147 million they have allocated on the defensive side of the ball in 2026, which is the 10th most in the NFL. So you move somebody like Crosby, you get Nolan on the 4th year. He's already been extended for the 5th year option, I think at like 15 million. You're also talking about a lot of financial, capability that they gain doing that. He goes back with one of his best friends, which is Nakobe Dean, who is probably, pushing hard for that. And also Quay Walker, who was part of the Georgia Dogs, who's over there as well. So you add him with that other pass rusher that they also have, Kwity Paye. And I mean, you're talking about a pretty nice young defense. And it also, like I said, mentioned, gives them a lot of cap flexibility. So I do think it is something they'd look into, but I don't know how much more they'd want. I mean, a 2 would be too much, a 3 maybe, but it would have to be a contingent 3 on like what they're getting for that Jalen, you know, from what they're getting back with Jalen, who left for Carolina. So I don't know if he wants to move all those resources or not, but he's clearly desirous of gaining another edge rusher.
I feel like it would make sense, right? Because you chase after Myles Garrett for so long. Like it should not be a question if the Eagles were ever in on Myles Garrett, because we know for the fact that how he checked in every offseason, even during the season on Myles Garrett. I mean, he has a good buddy over there in Barry, who's the GM. So we know that they've been chasing after him. Obviously, you're not going to give up a prize guy like Jalen Carter, but Maxx Crosby, I feel like, fits exactly what the Eagles need right now. Their offense is a little bit questionable entering the season because brand new offensive scheme, brand new offensive coordinator, brand new everything, offensive line coach. Like, this is the most new I feel like this offense has looked in years. And on top of it, you're no longer going to have AJ Brown on your sideline. It's going to be, the Jalen Hurts show and the Saquon Barkley show and the Devontae Smith show. But defensively, you can counteract for the lack of confidence you have in offense by acquiring a guy like Maxx Crosby, because your front four, or even if you want to call it, your front four, include 5 with Ojomo, but you have Carter, you have Davis, you have Grenard, and then you have Crosby. You have Jalen Hunt, who could rotate with Crosby or Grenard. You have the linebacker core. You have Jahad Campbell, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. You have Zach Bond. Like, it could be a very, very good defensive front to hold off on these offenses that are only getting better year in, year out. And ideally, this back in a day, this would be considered like a dream team, a Madden team that you're putting together. But it actually makes a lot of sense for the Eagles to do, and it actually makes a lot of sense that it would be him, because now you're keeping up with the Los Angeles Rams, who could be getting back Aaron Donald to pair with Myles Garrett. And facing a guy like Matthew Stafford, we saw how key Jalen Carter was, and that rush has to be very good entering this season.
Yeah, and you see how invested the Rams are in trying to win during their window as well, because Stafford has this year and likely next year, and then that's it. And they went all in. They've given up all of their picks. I mean, they historically aren't unafraid to do that, but also unafraid to make a blockbuster move is Howie Roseman. I mean, historically, he has a history of making those kind of moves if it's for the right guy. And I do think, Myles Garrett was 1A and Crosby is probably 1B. Some of that was just preference. I think Myles Garrett is, a generational talent. I don't think anybody would have Crosby ahead of him. But, the fact that the Ravens deal fell apart due to reportedly a failed physical due to his knee, that complicates the situation, quite a bit. And I think one of the reasons you hear Nolan mentioned so much is he had a bit of a tumultuous offseason, especially with that driving incident. and you just don't know, how much the Eagles want to invest in him going forward with something like that. Character matters, you know, almost as much as their physical talent and the Eagles upper brass there. So it makes a lot of sense that he's the name that they've been tossing in the circle there.
And Crosby's 20 years old, going into the 29th year old season. It would make sense for the Eagles to invest in a player like Crosby because you're not going to pay an arm and a leg for Nolan Smith, but you'll pay an arm and a leg for Crosby and keep him in his little window of remaining prime years that he does have. And he's paired with a Jalen Carter who's bound to get extended at some point this offseason. He's paired with Jordan Davis and Jonathan Grenard, who just signed an extension. Like, you can actually keep your Super Bowl window open a bit longer if you actually make a move like this, because you're adding talent on top of talent on top of talent, and you're also giving your offense a little bit of a leeway to get acclimated with changes that came this offseason.
Yeah, and he fits perfectly with like Jonathan Grenard, who I called like an analytics darling throughout the offseason.
Mhm.
But Crosby, he has some questions about sack totals too. But what's not a question is he ranks among the league leaders in tackles for loss and disruptive plays year after year. And he's fit really well for the Eagles because their defense is built around dominating the line of scrimmage. And you can just imagine offenses trying to account for him on that line when you're dealing with Jalen Carter on the inside, which is why they've wanted such an elite, pass rusher on the edge there, is because they want to weaponize him with Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is the force inside that will make all of that work. And he's already made, I don't want to say average edge rushers, but he's made edge rushers who just came into the NFL look really good
Mhm.
because of the accountability he calls for inside. So I can't imagine what he would make an elite edge rusher look like, because they're going to get a lot of one-on-ones like that. And like you mentioned, the Eagles are in win now mode. Jalen Hurts is in his prime. This is a championship caliber roster. There are questions about the offense, but I'm not as concerned about that because Jalen Hurts is still the engine running it. And he has shown ever since high school, basically, that he can adjust to whatever new OC is in the building. And, I fully intend on him doing that again. And Crosby also just fits like that same mentality that a lot of these guys have. He's known for just being a relentless guy, just tough, always, putting forth 100% effort. And he's a leader. So, like you said, he turns 29. Edge rushers can go a little longer, if
Mhm.
he could, depending upon, how severe that knee is. But yeah, for me, the deciding factor would be the medical evaluation. And if you're good with it, then I would make the move.
And that's my next question about the knee, right? Because if we're looking at Maxx Crosby and as a whole, right, since 2021, he's missed about 7 games. I mean, is that really that much of a concern? I mean, the guy, I'm not saying he's Iron Man now, right? But he's missed minimal amount of games. Now, those 7 games have come in the last 2 seasons. But we're talking about, I feel like a lot of things change when you go to a new place, and the Eagles have done very well with their medical staff. I mean, since back when actually, I feel like they haven't really suffered major injuries and lost guys outside of N'Kobe Dean for the season consistently. And a guy like Crosby, the grass could actually be greener for him. And I feel like it makes too much sense for it to not happen. Now, the same thing with Myles Garrett was the same, right? And the Eagles chased him to the very end, and the Rams overpaid. Like you said, they don't care about the picks. They don't even care about the young guys because they traded away Jared Verse. So I still feel like they shouldn't have let him go over this trade. But nonetheless, it just makes too much sense for me for not to happen. Now, you mentioned it's a 60-40 possibility, right? We are in June, entering July. Now, the longer this goes, the longer that Crosby's on the Raiders roster, the likelihood is that the price is going to go down little by little. The Ravens traded 2 first-round picks. I don't believe they're getting that yet for him again, but I could see a first and a fourth, a first and a third plus Nolan, or first and a fourth plus Nolan, in exchange for Maxx Crosby and probably a late round pick. Do you think do you think that the pressure is on the Raiders to make this happen, or do you think there's more pressure on the Eagles to make a move like this? Because, like you said, they've been chasing after a star edge rusher or even a good edge rusher to pair with Jalen Carter.
the fact that the Eagles landed Jonathan Grenard on draft day, which I think if that trade had been done at any other time of the year, would be looked at a lot more favorably than it has. It's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle because it happened on draft night. But that was a significant addition. But you're right. He still wants, he wants a elite guy up there who can be counted on. So yeah, I do think it makes sense. And I think a lot of fans might disagree with this part, but even if they gave away a first, a fourth, and Nolan, the goal would be to get 2 strong years and a third year out of Crosby, in my opinion. And a lot of people would think that'd be wasting assets, but if the knee is a concern long term and it has a degenerative issue, they're obviously not going to go down this road. But he had surgery in January to repair a torn meniscus and a related like bone cartilage stress injury type of thing on his left knee. And if everything checks out, and like you said, he is a warrior. He's played through all of this. But if he gets 100% bill of health and the Eagles doctors, sign off on that, and again, it's not degenerative, yeah, I think they would be willing to pay that price. And you make a good point about what the Rams have already given up. And the Eagles didn't have to give up their Jared Verse, which to them is Jalen Carter. And Jalen Carter's not in every single draft, nor are the Eagles going to pick ninth in every single draft. You don't get that kind of talent very frequently. And if the Eagles are as good as we're believing them to be, that 2027 first round pick is the same as an early second.
Mhm.
So, and the Raiders think that too. But all that being said, the Raiders are the ones who tried to trade Crosby once. I think the pressure is more on them. The Eagles can go into this season. They don't have the elite guy maybe that they wanted, but they have a really strong rotation, especially if Nolan Smith is healthy as well.
Yeah, and I like the addition of AJ Espinoza.
Yeah. Again, health. That's the only reason he's sitting there.
Yeah, they've added quite a few guys, but again, it's they're adding at edge because it feels like they keep on adding to satisfy the idea of not having a guy like Crosby. Like for example, wide receiver. They've added so many wide receivers to this group because they knew AJ Brown was not going to be here. If you have a guy like Crosby here, you're not adding so many guys. You're just adding for depth, and you're getting the right guys. So it feels like the Eagles are trying to fill the void with anything that they can at this rate. But
Those are the two positions, right? It's wide receiver and edge. I mean, they're just stocking. And the guy they got today, Eric Izukama, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He's another guy who fits that mold of what they're looking for with yards after the catch, can work the middle of the field. He's 6'3", 220. I mean, they're getting body types, and there's a lot of strategic thought process behind what they're doing. Same with the edge rushers. AJ is really good against the run, and he's another guy who can just create pressure. And the more pressure they can create on that end of the ball, just causing chaos. And the same on the wide receiver side. They want to work the middle of the field. They want to get yak. They're investing in a lot of the same traits over and over and over and over.
And they also added the kid from Atlanta. I'm terrible with last names, and you know this firsthand. So I'm gonna try my best, and I'm gonna look it up right now. But let me see. So Arnold Ebiketie?
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that either.
Okay.
But yeah, another really good player. They're hoping he's what Azeez Ojulari was supposed to be last year. I mean,
that broke my heart. Okay, it's still a sore spot. Let's not bring that up. I swore up and down he was gonna be my breakout candidate, and he kind of failed me. But I don't know. I mean, Crosby right now feels like Saquon in free agency. Just you got to pay the price if you want the quality. And I mean, they signed Saquon to a big deal, right? And then he has the big season. Then they signed him to another big deal to get him more money. This could be that move for the defense because, like we mentioned, the money's going to start going to the defensive side with the offense ideally getting younger through the draft.
Yeah, and you pay for that kind of talent, right? I mean, if you want Crosby, it's going to cost. It costs to get AJ Brown. It costs, when you want that kind of talent, it's going to cost you. The darts that they're kind of throwing now at wide receiver and edge are traits. Like Arnold has, the same traits they look for: first step explosion, bend, a high motor, high effort, pressure rates, hand usage, scheme flexibility, and again, that's the same thing they're doing on the wide receiver side. yak and middle of the field, and just it being able to win in a lot different manners in which they've done before. But when you're talking about a talent like Maxx Crosby, you're talking about one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. It's a premium talent, and it costs. But like you mentioned, in free agency, they were willing to outbid everybody for Saquon. On draft night in 2022, they were willing to do whatever it took to get that wide receiver they wanted. And the commonality between those two nights is in 2022 and 2024, they got the target that they wanted. They ended up in the Super Bowl both years. So that's a strong track record to give you, the kind of kick you need in the rear to make the move to get the player you want yet again.
I mean, so far they've ended up in the Super Bowl every other year in Jalen's year Jalen's career as a starter,
Yeah.
which is a hell of a trait. And before we get into the Jalen Hurts conversation, 'cause I do think we owe the fans to cover that, right? Where do you draw the line in the sand for a Maxx Crosby deal of what the Eagles are going to give up?
I mean, assuming the knee's good to go, let's just make that the assumption.
Okay.
I would give up a 1-3 and Nolan Smith, which might sound absurd, but I would. I think he's that big of a talent. I think if this was 3 months ago when the Ravens made the deal, had the Eagles given up a 1-3 and Nolan Smith, then nobody would have blinked. It's just the fact that it's later into the year. You think that there should be a discount because the Ravens rescinded the deal, and but that's just not how it's going to work from the Raiders end either. They got to save face. They can at least sell to their fan base, hey, we got a first round pick and a third and another first. They got the first round pick in Nolan Smith, a player who was a first round talent. They can sell that to their fan base. But yeah, I think that would be fair value, assuming his knee is not degenerative and they honestly believe they'll get 3 healthy seasons out of him.
I think I do agree with that. I think I agree with the structure of first and Nolan, but I would. They are getting the comp pick for Jalen, right? But I try to nudge for a fourth,
I would
honestly.
too.
Because I mean, like you mentioned, Nolan is a former first round pick. If he's on any other team, the guy is probably a star pass rusher. But he was on the Eagles, and the Eagles were loaded with pass rushers. They traded for Jalen Phillips. They have Jalen Carter. They have Jordan Davis. They just traded for Jonathan Grenard. Like they had Brandon Graham here, and they've had and Josh Sweat as well. They've had consistent talent at the edge, and I feel like Nolan Smith hasn't really had the opportunity to be that guy. But he's also been injured, and he was supposed to be the replacement for Hassan Reddick. I would make the move if you're trying to win now. I mean, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you get Super Bowl talent. And not to say Nolan Smith isn't, but right now, like you have a chance to really go over the top. And quarterbacks are not getting dumber; they're not getting worse. The Matthew Staffords out there are still getting better with age. You got Jordan Love, who's going to figure it out at some point. Jaden Daniels, we don't know what he's going to be, but he was pretty damn good before. And whether we like to admit it or not, Dak Prescott has been a pretty damn consistent quarterback, and now he still has George Pickens out there with CeeDee Lamb. The Eagles need to find their advantage, and I feel like Maxx Crosby is that advantage. And a first, a fourth, and Nolan Smith to me is like, okay, I can live with that, and I get the long-term picture.
Yeah, I agree. And it could be another player that the Eagles don't plan on, having on their 53. Keely Ringo, another Georgia dog. A lot of teams still have a lot of faith in him because of his age. I mean, he's still really young, and he could transition to safety and end up being good. I mean, you never know what can happen with that. They
He's
also have
over 24 yet.
he might be 24, but I don't believe he's over that. And they also have Tanner McKee. That's another really good chip to have.
Tanner McKee's a third-round pick or
I don't believe he was ever getting a 1, 2, or 3 for pick, but he is a good trade chip. Teams are always willing to take a gamble on a quarterback.
That would be a hell of a move. But let's talk about gambling on a quarterback, right? Because that's the topic of the week. Gambling on a quarterback, because apparently 7 years later, the Eagles are still gambling on a quarterback and gambling on a guy who brought them to 2 Super Bowls and won them 1. Is it unfair? Let's start with that. Is it unfair, the criticism that Jalen Hurts is receiving entering this year? It's being declared as a prove-it year now.
Is it unfair? Yeah. I mean, are we talking about just certain hit pieces and certain commentary about him, or the fan base?
I'm gonna say this respectfully, right? Because at the end of the day, I would say they're our peers, right? We brush shoulders with them. I don't respect their opinions on this matter at all, and I say that very respectfully.
So we're
Just
talking media opinions is
yeah, let's
what
talk
you're
media
talking.
opinions, right? Because I feel
Um,
like the fan base is still like 75-25.
unfortunately, a lot of those comment commentators who say that it kind of cause the fan base to believe a lot of it. I mean, they are influenced by a lot of that, and a lot of times with good reason. I mean, a lot of people saying these things, are in there every day. We're in the locker room, but we're not around the team 24/7 like some of these other guys. And those elite, beat writers that have that type of access, they are revered in the city of Philadelphia, at the same time hated. Like I guess they're more infamous than famous in some ways. I don't know,
Mhm.
but do I think it's fair? I think it's fair to question any athlete any year, as far as every year is a prove it year. We kind of talked about this off camera. I mean, last year, Dave Dombrowski, the Philadelphia Phillies GM, basically said Bryce Harper, he doesn't know if he'll ever be elite again. I mean, can you imagine Howie Roseman saying something like that? I mean, what we hear is speculation. That was straight out of the GM's mouth. I mean,
Correct.
so, do I think it's fair? I mean, everybody can have any opinion they want. I think what's unfair is when your opinion is based off of just reading tea leaves and not fact, and you're trying to sell it as that, we all supposed to believe that Lurie doesn't like them, or that, Nick doesn't like them or have faith in them and stuff. I think that's where it gets, very muddied, is that where's the opinion and where's the fact being, you
Mm.
know, mixed
The lines
into
are
this.
blurred. The lines are
Yeah, but
very blurred in this.
I do think, the water is as clear as mud, and it's very hard to tell what we're looking at through that. And is it fair to question? You can question anybody for anything, challenge them, and he's not, immune to that type of criticism. He does it to himself. I mean, he whatever you've seen about his game that you don't like, he knows it, 10 times more than you. Like, he is very in tune with that stuff. Um, what I think happens is, because he doesn't address a lot of it, and it just kind of lets it go, that it has given, carte blanche to say these things, because he's not going to snap back like some of the other athletes, will. He's just going to sit there and go about it. I don't remember what he said. He said something recently about when they asked him, about being talked about in that light. And I believe he said, I've never really asked for an opportunity to respond to anything. I think that was his exact quote.
Mhm.
And that lets the door open for that continued, narrative to happen to him. But
Is there anything you think he could say, or I mean, we know what he could do to kind of shut up the critics, right? But he's won a Super Bowl and it's still here, and he's not an old quarterback that's washed. Like, he's still very much in his prime. But do you think, is there anything Jalen Hurts can come out and say to kind of nip the bud on a lot of things that are being said about him, said towards him as well?
no, I think it would take Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie or somebody saying, and to a small degree, they kind of have, right? Like,
Mhm.
Lurie basically, just diffused praise, during the offseason for him. And I think, AJ Brown basically stated that him and Hertz relationship deteriorated some. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said.
Mhm.
And who did the Eagles side with throughout this whole ordeal? Which is what frustrated AJ Brown the most. Why he kept doing cryptic posts. Why Jeffrey Lurie had to go over there and tell him, basically, chill out with this stuff. We will accommodate whatever it is you want, but we got to get through this. I think that you see the decision making that they've done with their actions more than anything they've said. But the fact that nobody, comes out, Jalen himself, the upper management and all, again, it just kind of leads people to have the free will to do a lot of these, say a lot of the things that they say. And, and again, a lot of it, if it's an opinion, if it's an op-ed, have at it. But when it's being spoken like it's
Like
fact,
it's
I think is where people get confused about everything. Not saying anybody has, because I don't really listen to any of that, but it gets overwhelming at times, because it's hard to miss it because of Twitter and everything else. You're going to see the quotes, even if you're not listening to the radio or watching the TV programs that a lot of these people are on. You end up seeing things, but
It's an interesting place to be, right? Because I feel like Jalen Hurts. I personally I like the way he carries himself. I feel like when you
agreed.
go to a place to work, you carry yourself like a professional. You do your job. You go home and you be yourself with the people that you trust and that you know are not gonna be judging every move, right? And that's how he acts. And I've always respected about him because that's how he carries himself. He's a winner. Like you can't explain how at times, but he pulls out of his ass and he wins games. He wins big games. He shows up for big games. But he's also the type of person that he's very strategic. Jalen Hurts knows when to push the button. Just because the airplane's going down, the pilot is screaming Mayday, doesn't mean that he's going to press the parachute button just yet. He's going to trust different factors to fall in line as things are going down before he presses the button and says, "Is that what you guys wanted to see?" Like that's who he is. He doesn't panic. He doesn't fold. He doesn't care about what people say about him. And that part, it does irritate me a bit, right? Because I do wish he was a little bit more open with the media because I feel like a lot of this stuff could be dodged. Is there always going to be teammates that don't agree with you? Absolutely. There are always going to be guys that don't agree with you in every single locker room you ever play in. But I do agree with you when it comes to these kind of articles, when it comes to these kind of columns, it's got to be taken with a grain of salt. Because at the end of the day, you have a billionaire owner praising his quarterback. You have a GM saying that the article is unfair, praising his quarterback. You have Nick Sirianni, who even though these two have butt heads so many times, they've even alluded to it at times, he still backs his quarterback day in and day out. Jalen's a team first guy, and I think that's what rubs people the wrong way. He's not an Aaron Rodgers. He's not a Caleb Williams. You don't see Jalen yelling at his players in the middle of a play on the field or on the sideline. He's not that guy. He's the guy that, hey, you messed up. Cool. Let's focus on getting it right the next time. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. I'll give a little shameless plug. Tomorrow I have a Jalen Hurts story coming out, and I'm gonna give one of the quotes right now because it's relative, and it's about proving himself. And what he said was, I'm gonna have to read it. My first 6 years, I felt like the first three were about proving what type of player I am, what I'm capable of, who I can be, and that I can play on this platform. That's how he felt the first 3 years. Well, in that third year, he went to the Super Bowl and lost that big game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the end of that quote is, because he lost that game, that was what motivated me the most to get back on that stage and showed that I am what I should be. I can play at a high level. I am a quarterback, and all those things that they said I wasn't when I came out of college, I am. And, he doesn't feel like he needs to prove himself anymore. He's in win mode.
Mm-hmm.
And if any negative thing would come from this, it would be not what Philadelphia is thinking about him. It's what he's thinking about them. Because if he doesn't think they have his back, if he doesn't think that they're giving him support, he could be the one who wants to leave. And, that would be a real shame because this is a really good marriage, I think. His ability to withstand everything that, any market media, high stress media market will give him, he's unaffected by it. And
Mm-hmm.
I find it pretty rare that you're going to find a quarterback like that to play in this city.
And there's not many quarterbacks out there like him to begin with. I mean, you have guys who come out the rookie year, they blow the lid off the cannon. People declare him as the next great thing, top 5 quarterback. Sophomore season, they shit the bed.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it with CJ Stroud, right? We saw Jaden Daniels being injured and being ineffective when he's on the field. We've seen a lot of guys just fall to the wayside at times. But the one constant we've had in Philadelphia is Jalen Hurts is more than just a quarterback. He's actually a leader in this locker room. He's a guy that people gravitate towards. Jordan Mailata has spoken highly about him. Saquon has spoken highly about him. The defense loves him. Like there's nobody I mean, I can't say nobody, right? Because his best friend didn't like him. But there's nobody that that you can really say like that's viable enough to be like, hey, like this guy doesn't like him. Like maybe it's true. Like this isn't the Carson Wentz stuff all over again. This isn't a guy who has a clique and just excluding everybody. This is a guy who doesn't care about cliques. He doesn't care about, I don't want to say how you're feeling, but he doesn't care about the reactions in the moment. He wants to make the moment the best it can be. He wants to maximize off of it. And it's very rare to find a player like that. A lot of the greats ended up being like that. And the big thing about it is, right, even the greats, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, all these great quarterbacks have nothing bad to say about Jalen Hurts, but the media, who has not played a lick of football, and I'm talking about the local media, has not played a lick of football in their lives, have everything bad in the world to say about this guy.
Yeah, he relates to a lot of the adversity and how it drives other people. He also mentioned how he like emotionally related to Michael Jordan, which you know how much he likes him. You know, he follows a lot in those footsteps. But he said that that the Last Dance really had a big influence on him when he watched it in 2020, and he felt like he could relate to a lot of the things that Michael Jordan spoke on, specifically the adversity and what drove him. So he uses that as fuel, but at some point you wonder if you tire of that.
I completely agree with that. And then I think we're on the same page when it comes to the 2026 season, right? I think he's going to show up and show out. Am I guaranteeing a Super Bowl? If they get Maxx Crosby, I'll say yes, Super Bowl bust. But I think getting to the playoffs with an offense that doesn't look stale, an offense that's moving the chains, an offense that's effective on first, second down, that's not on third and long every single drive. Like, I think if we progress from what we had last year to a better version of it, to me, he's the guy. He's still the guy. You pay him that extra extension that's in limbo right now. You get Nicole Lynn on the phone, who you and I both respect very much because she's a hell of an agent. You get her on the phone, you extend the guy because you want something consistent. I'm getting tired of the quarterback factory. That's not really a factory.
Right. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on the time frame there. If he does well in 2026, they have to extend him. And if there's not an extension, it tells you one of two things. Either they don't believe in his progression going forward, or he didn't want to be here. He doesn't want to accept it. But yeah, at the end of 2026 is when that has to happen. All signs point to that because he really doesn't have very much guaranteed money after 2027, which is in two years. And 2028, I think they can get out of this with like the 50 million dead cap hit, which they could care less about. So yeah, this is the year. And and I do share your optimism with the outlook for that. You mentioned these commentation about him and people having negative comments or whatever at this point. But what I found so strange about it is all season long, when everything was going bad, the offense wasn't working, he really wasn't blamed that often. All season long, the fans and a lot of the media blamed AJ Brown for being a distraction. And if it wasn't AJ Brown, the other person who got all the blame was offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo. And all of a sudden, both of them are gone now. So where does the negative narrative go back to? Jalen Hurts, because the other two aren't here to give it to anymore. And it
I mean, I
happened
can tell
like
you where it should
clockwork.
go. You want to ask me where it should go, but that's not a conversation for today.
But it happened that quick. Once Patullo was gone, the focus all went to AJ. Once AJ is gone, it goes right back to Jalen Hurts. And and I loved when he was asked about the 4-vert question in the playoffs. And did you want that? No. I mean, just emphatic no.
How many
There's
people do you
nothing
think
much
that
more to
pissed
talk
off?
about. Yeah, I mean, but it's just so crazy to me how the narrative goes from it was all Kevin Patullo's fault, AJ Brown was a distraction, to suddenly it was Jalen's fault. He's in a prove it year. We got to see if he can do this. I just don't understand it. The only thing I could say for the people who do want Jalen Hurts out of town, and there are a small faction of the fan base or whatever that does feel that way, is that they have completely revamped the offense. The only thing they haven't changed basically is him. So if he did not do what they want to do moving forward as far as the offense goes, that would be the only way he would be out of here.
I completely agree with you, and it's gonna be a very eye-opening season for the Eagles one way or another. Whether they trade for a guy like Crosby, or whether they have a great offense with Jalen Hurts, or they move off of Jalen Hurts. It's gonna be one of those seasons where it could really change the tides of things, how things are gonna look in the future. We either have a constant or we have a retool, how he likes to call it back then. But nonetheless, We appreciate everybody for joining into the show today. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on the video. If you are watching on Twitter, be sure to head to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel. We are live every Tuesday night to bring you the latest in Eagles news. Any last thoughts? Crosby, Hurts, any emotional outbursts before we let the people go?
If I was to give a percentage, I would put a 70% chance likelihood that Jalen Hurts is going to thrive in this offense and quiet most of the doubters and hopefully get that extension at season's end. And I would probably put it at like 20-25% that they get Maxx Crosby, but that's about what I would put Myles Garrett at as well. And they unquestionably were in that to the very end. So you never know what could happen.
I like that. I like that a lot. I do believe the Eagles have a great offense, and I think they can have an even better defense one way or another. But nonetheless, we'll be live with you guys next Tuesday. I'm Brian Cameron alongside David Neese, and we're flipping the birds. Flip.